How do you start your morning? Al Capone liked to start his mornings fishing in the waters of sunny Florida. Only he never caught a single fish. Yeah, apparently, chlorinated swimming pools aren't the best place for a bit of catch and release. But Al Capone didn't know that. He was dumber than a sack of hammers. That's what happens when you contract syphilis and refuse to take a shot of penicillin. Alphonse Capone was born in Brooklyn, New York on January 17, 1899. The fourth of 9 children, his parents immigrated to the United States from Naples in 1893. A sign of what was to come, he was kicked out of school in the 6th grade after punching a teacher in the face. With education out of the question, he teamed up with the South Brooklyn Rippers and the 40 Thieves Juniors. Kid gangs. It was like the Italian-American version of daycare.
Why are you looking at the other babies, huh?
Pictured like the movie Gangs of New York, only substitute Daniel Day-Lewis and Liam Neeson and Leonardo DiCaprio with the Rugrats.
A few crusty bitches and a handful of ragtags.
The Harvard Inn was like Brooklyn's answer to Tombstone's Birdcage Theater. It's where Capone got his nickname Scarface.
Where'd you get the beauty scar, tough guy? Eating pussy?
After Frank Galluccio slashed him across the cheek with a razor for calling his sister a slut.
How am I gonna get a scar like that eating pussy?
But, according to Capone, that's not how he got his scar.
Capone would claim he received the scars while fighting in France during World War I. However, he was never in the army.
In no time at all, Capone quickly began to earn a name for himself. But in 1919, Capone's passion for street fighting led to deadly consequences.
The ambitious Al Capone is forced to leave New York.
That's one way to put it. He beat the shit out of a low-ranking member of the White Hand Gang and left him for dead. But things couldn't have been better. Capone arrived in the Windy City just as the locals began tearing each other apart in the streets over Prohibition.
Prohibition made Al Capone. Without Prohibition, there is no Al Capone.
Capone started working at a popular speakeasy called the Four Deuces. Badass fucking name. I guess, sure, like the term popular speakeasy may sound like an oxymoron, but there's something you gotta understand here. In the 1920s, nobody gave a fuck.
They were nightclubs. They were very successful nightclubs. It became fashionable to break the law.
Capone's job was to stand out in front of the illegal establishment and shout about how good their illegal beer was. During this time, Capone and Torrio grew close. After a series of gangland murders, Capone impressed Torrio so much that he became his right-hand man.
Make it so, number one.
But after barely escaping an attempted assassination, Torrio hopped on a flight to Italy.
Yellow bird, I'll fly away with you.
Ceding all control over his empire to Capone. Capone was different from his predecessors. Most criminals do their best to keep a low profile. Running around in the public eye, it's not good for business, especially if your business involves, breaking the law and murdering people. But Capone, he didn't see it that way.
Al Capone was the celebrity of crime.
Yeah, it's not like he just rubbed shoulders with reporters from time to time.
Do you know who I am?
He was known for openly bragging about which politicians were in his pocket.
I'm kind of a big deal.
Over time, he became adorned by the press and public alike.
People know me.
There was just something about someone who overcomes adversity by murdering the shit out of people. Here was this uneducated kid who came up from a tough immigrant neighborhood and managed to become a multi-millionaire by his early 20s by murdering other uneducated immigrants. In no time, gangsters were everywhere, and it wasn't long at all before Hollywood wanted a piece of the action.
Go on, get out of here, beat it!
The public loved gangsters so much that eventually they went from being the villains to the heroes of every story. It's not like they were killing innocent civilians or anything, just other immigrants. But not everyone had a hard-on for gangster flicks. Eventually, outlaw films and their leading characters became so popular that the government introduced the Hays Code, which said that the gangsters cannot win. They gotta lose in the end. The Hays Code was like YouTube's terms of services, only way less artistically crushing. When the code was lifted in 1968, films picked up right where they left off, immediately glorifying gangsters again. But in the meantime, with the silver screen out of the question, Capone had to find another way to convince the general public that gangsters were just your average Joes with murderous job descriptions. Ironically enough, Capone thought he found the answer to this question with one of Hollywood's most legendary figures.
Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest. Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day.
Yeah, he saw himself as a modern-day Robin Hood with syphilis and a Thompson submachine gun, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. So, the 20s were fucking awesome. Even though Prohibition was meant to tame the public,
Everybody, calm down.
it actually had quite the opposite effect. It just gave everyone an excuse to break the law. At this point, Capone's living the dream.
Al Capone controls a network of bootlegging, speakeasies, brothels, gambling operations. Net income is estimated in the $100 million range.
But although he had it all, the money, the power, the fame, nothing lasts forever. Eventually, all of that fame and wealth went straight to his head, and on February 14th, 1929, an event occurred that changed the public's perception of the lovable gangster. On Valentine's Day, 1929, 4 heavily armed men disguised as policemen entered a garage at 2122 North Clark Street. Their target? Members of Bug Moran's North Side Gang. After announcing the raid, they lined 7 of the gang members up against a wall and machine gunned them down in cold blood. Labeled public enemy number 1, Capone made a break for Philly to lay low until the heat died down surrounding the killings. But it never did. To make things worse, Hoover became president.
Nobody gets the dirt like Hoover.
And made it his mission to take down Capone no matter the cost.
We spared no expense.
Everyone knew Al Capone was a gangster, but technically, no one could prove it. How do you bring down a guy who has enough money to bribe every man, woman, and child in America? Capone had hundreds of cops in his pocket who were willing to just turn a blind eye to his criminal activities. But Ness had a foolproof solution. He would build a law enforcement dream team, a team that couldn't be bribed, a team that was
the Untouchables.
An honorable stance, but it didn't work.
You got nothing.
They accepted bribes all the time. But who cares? Ness and his ragtag team of corrupt untouchables weren't responsible for bringing down Capone anyway.
Let's do some good!
Capone wasn't brought down with guns and car chases. Far from it, actually. It wasn't these guys who took him down. It was more like these guys.
Ivan Glavin.
Yeah, a team of mega nerds working around the clock was responsible for the downfall of Al Capone. They were the real heroes, but unfortunately for them, no one wants to watch a movie about a bunch of fucking nerds circle jerking over thousands of receipts.
Dude, that movie sucked.
On June 5th, 1931, Alphonse Gabriel Capone is indicted for tax evasion. The government charges that Capone owes over $215,000 in taxes over his gambling profits.
Now, typically you receive 18 months to 2 years for this type of crime, but not when you're public enemy number 1. Capone was sentenced to 11 years in prison. To make an even bigger example of him, he was transferred to Alcatraz. I'm gonna put in that Connery clip there. Welcome to the Rock.
Welcome to the Rock.
For Capone, being confined in one of the most notorious prisons in America turned out to be the least of his worries.
Capone probably contracted syphilis when he was still a teenager.
Yeah, he knew about it the whole time, but didn't do shit about it. Capone was paroled in 1939, but it was too late. With the mental capacity of a 12-year-old, his remaining days were spent fishing in his swimming pool in Florida until he died from a stroke at the age of 48. So what do you think? Does the term "there's no such thing as bad publicity" apply to murders? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to murder that subscribe button and click that notification bell, because I've got new content dropping all the time. And if you just can't get enough, you can also head over and follow on Instagram and TikTok for even more killer content.